Okay. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. That makes 10 children total, and 10 is the number of human completeness because we have 10 fingers on our hands. So that 7 plus 3 equals 10. 7 is, of course, the perfect number. Add 3 to that, and you have 10, which is the full, complete number. So he had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, so there's that 7,000, 7 again, 3,000 camels, so there's 10, 500 yoke of oxen, that means 1,000, because that's 2 for each, and 500 donkeys, and again, there another 1,000 on a multiple of 10, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the east. And east basically just means anywhere east of Israel. Edom is not too far east of Israel, but it is technically east of Israel. So basically, whenever you read that, it's just, we saw this way back in Genesis 2, where God plants a garden in the east. Don't know how far east it was, it's just east of Israel. So somewhere east of Israel. He was the greatest man amongst all those who were living east of Israel. Meaning he himself, of course, was not an Israelite. His sons used to take turns holding feasts in their homes. So these are grown men at this point. Maybe young men, but still grown men. And they would invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, I presume that means a week, but I don't really know, Job would send and have them purified. Early in the morning he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, "Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This was Job's regular custom. One of the reasons why people, I think, have developed over the years this idea that Job lived in the time of Abraham is because Job functions as a family priest. He is not, which he wouldn't do if he were living under the law of Moses. You know, the priests were the priests. There was a special class of people who were designated priests. Before that, of course, the family heads, the heads of the household, functioned as a family priest. And the firstborn son had certain rights that were conferred upon him as he took care of the family duties as his patriarch got older. That's why, in the book of Numbers, when they fight over who gets to be the firstborn, they have to redeem the actual firstborn sons of Israel and put the Levite tribe in their place. Anyway, Job is not following any of that. Now, people over the years have gotten this idea that's because he lived before all that. To a certain degree, that may be true. But it could also be that simply he's not an Israelite. He is not bound by the Mosaic law because he's not an Israelite. He's not part of that covenant relationship with God. So it could be that he's living slightly earlier than that. It could be. Or it could be that he's simply not an Israelite and therefore is not bound by the law of the Mosaic priesthood. The Mosaic covenant and the Aaronic priesthood may not apply to him because he's not an Israelite. At any rate, he is functioning as the family priest. And that was his regular custom. One day, the angels, or the sons of God, came to present themselves before the Lord. So now we're getting a sight of what the heavenly council looks like. The angels are lining up, apparently, and presenting themselves before the Lord. And Satan, we have in our English Bibles a capital letter S, Satan here, indicating that this is a personal name. It is not. In this context, Satan is not to be used as a personal name. Now, maybe later on it will be. Who knows? Okay, we'll see that as we go. We have identified Satan as like a singular being based on later scriptures. But here in Job, a very early book in the Bible, Satan has not yet been singled out as a specific individual entity. And this word here, Satan, really should just be read as the adversary or the opponent. because there is nothing particularly special about this one at this point in time. I'm not even sure if he is supposed to be here or not. It says Satan, or the opposer, also came with them. It's really unclear to me whether or not that some people will tell you, and some people have, and you can read it this way, that he is interrupting the divine council. God is apparently conducting an interview with his angelic hosts about what they're doing as they go about administrating his world, I suppose. And then this one just shows up unannounced and uninvited, and God asks him what he's doing. I'm not completely sure that if I follow that line with that thinking. It reads to me that this could just be the daily roll. The angels are answering the daily roll call in heaven, and Satan is just one of them. The accuser, the opposer, the adversary is just simply one of them. I don't know. I don't know how intrusive his presence here is at this council. He may be doing what he's created to do. Now this will cause some people to just lose their minds and dance around and fidget and scream and holler. This idea that God created Satan to be Satan. But really we don't have any indication anywhere in the Bible that anything else happened. We don't have a creation account for the angels. We don't know when or where or why or how he made them. We don't know if there was a separate class of category of good angels or bad angels. We assume we know these things. We have grown up hearing these sorts of things taken for granted in our teaching and our preaching. But when you go back and you actually read through the Bible, read through the Old Testament and parse through it carefully, you'll see the Old Testament itself doesn't really say that. Okay? We don't really know where Satan came from. We don't really have grounds to say that God just didn't make him as he is. People will look at this as being an example of Satan doing something, but I'm not sure if he's doing anything that he wasn't created to do. He may have been created to be the opponent. He may have been created to be the accuser. I don't know. I just don't know. At any rate, so there's a scene in heaven with the divine council. God is calling roll for his angels, apparently. And Satan, or the Satan, also came with them. The Lord said to the opposer, "Where have you come from?" The adversary answered the Lord, "From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it." Then the Lord said to the opposer, the accuser, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." So whenever the story is taking place, we're meant to believe that Job is the most upright man on earth at this point in time. He's not an Israelite. So whenever he lived, apparently at the time that he was alive, there were no Israelites or no descendants of Abraham through Isaac that were holier than he. We saw that before already with Melchizedek. When Abraham comes back from fighting the kings of the east, he's greeted by Melchizedek, who blesses him, indicating that Melchizedek is greater than Abraham, and Abraham receives the blessing, indicating that he acknowledges Melchizedek's greatness. So at that point in time, Abraham is not the most righteous man on earth. And here, apparently, during Job's time, another man who was not an Israelite was the most righteous man on earth. Apparently. So it seems like it. God himself says he's blameless and upright. "Does Job fear God for nothing?" the Satan replied. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has?" So this is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Job fears God because God blesses him. This is basically a version of the prosperity gospel, which has become so popular, or was at least. I don't know if it still is, but it was in the 80s and 90s and 2000s so popular in the United States. The idea that if you're faithful to God, he will bless you with material possessions. Or he'll bless your life. Sometimes it was stated more generically as just bless your life. But basically behind that idea, behind that thought of blessing your life, the idea always was he'll give you things. He'll give you a nice job, a nice home, a nice car, a pretty wife, all these things. And that was very, in fact, I would say it still is. Now, the churches where I go to today have not advocated that line of thinking. I think one of my churches kind of did when I first started going there. When I started going to the Greater Alton Church, there was a lot of, bless your life talk that they kind of scrubbed out of themselves a few years after I started going there, which is good. They don't really talk that way anymore, but they did for a while. Zion, of course, is a much more traditional Lutheran denomination, and so they've never had. And Zion, of course, is a Lutheran church, which is very big on sin and sinners, and so they're never going to preach much of a prosperity gospel. Okay, that's never going to be the position of a mainstream Lutheran, traditional Lutheran church. But it has been a very popular line of thinking in the U.S. in the second half of the 20th century, into the beginning of the 21st century. Which is not true. I mean, the prosperity gospel is not the gospel. And so those who hold to that line of thinking are holding to a line of thinking that is false. In fact, it's basically what Satan is advocating here. He's basically saying here that Job fears God and does all this stuff because he gets material blessing out of it. So Satan himself basically is accusing here Job of believing in a prosperity gospel. So if that's what Satan thinks about your belief system, then that belief system is probably messed up. But he is essentially saying that Job believes in a prosperity gospel. You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand, or your right hand, it would always be the right hand in this imagery. Stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. Hang on a second.